much for blessing me with your presence. You guys truly make me feel good. This is what we do, what we do. So with that said, I just, what's Mary Faye? So I want to tell you a quick story. So I used to stalk MFP before I became MFP fellow. And Janet knows this story very well. And I know that when the program came to Miami, I was asked to come as a visitor. And when I came, and it was held at Fontainebleau in Miami. If you guys know Fontainebleau, Miami, you don't want to leave Fontainebleau, Miami. So that's where MFP was being held. And I came as a visitor, and I did not want to leave. So I crashed the party. And Miss Janet Jackson allowed me to stay in a room with Mary Faye, and Dr. Gary didn't know that. Finally, they felt sorry for me. Dr. Gary agreed, and I stayed for the rest of the institute, and I stalked them until they allowed me to be part of their family. And here we are, I don't know how many years later, so. But I just wanted to share, how truly I'm in love with this program. I saw Mary Faith today, and we talked about the history that we had together as sisters of the MFP program, the things that we have gone through, the things that we have seen. Last night I have dinner with Dawn, just to seeing her growth, how powerful it is to see our own sisters and brothers grow in achievement and empowerment. Just makes you feel good. So we have to celebrate one another. So take the time to do that. Not only today, but tomorrow and beyond. So good morning. That's just my word of again, being blessed with your presence. So thank you so much. With that said, I am going now to introduce Dr. Katie Boston-Leary, and she is the ANA Director, Nurse of Nursing Practice and Work Environment. Ready? Yep. Okay, let's welcome her.
Good morning. Good morning. I should wait for you to respond. Good morning. All right. I'm trying to, when I first walked into the room, I saw this pillar in the middle. I said, oh, this is not going to work. But Sam reassured me that it works out. You guys have been fine. So I think I'll probably stay here. Occasionally, I may move around because that's just my nature, especially when we get to some interactive portions of my talk, but I also want to echo, thank you for that wonderful introduction and for your storytelling. I'm overjoyed to be here. It's really great. This is such a reputable program that's so rich in history. It's really, truly an honor to be here with you and to really see some of the people that are a part of the work, but also the people that are contributing to the mission of MFP. I also want to start with, let me just get the objectives out of the way because this is the formality. This gives you a sense of what I hope to cover today. And I'm not going to read them to you. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I want to see whether I have a co-presenter here today. Does anyone know about Titanic syndrome? Or heard about it? No? All right. Well, if it rings a bell to you, or if it's something like pops in your mind, like, oh yeah, I did hear about that or read something, let me know, because I'm all about not being the only expert in the room. There are some dangers in that. So that's why we all learn from each other. I also want to recognize my dear colleague, Janet Jackson. I'm in love with this woman. From the beginning, when I joined ANA about 2 years ago, she was one of the people that I couldn't wait to meet when I joined the organization. Janet will probably tell you, I kept reaching out to her and I said, Janet, I'd like to have a one-on-one with you. I'd like to meet you. And she kept putting me off. Not right now, Katie, not right now, Katie. And she must have told me that 3 times until she had the time. And when she did, I was just even more enthralled with her. So I want to recognize her for her leadership. Sam also, who's a great colleague, Sandra, just everyone. And really want to thank you also for making this program sing. All right. So let me tell you about what I do at ANA. I do a number of things. My overarching title is the Director of Nursing Programs, and yes, I oversee the Nursing Practice and Work Environment Division. And you go, okay, what does that cover? That's like a lot, or is it to you? So I just figured I'd try to give a snapshot of what I cover and what I do. So I want to start with the fact that you saw Holly yesterday, Holly Carpenter. She's one of the members of my team, and I hear she did a fantastic job, and you guys love the yoga that she did with you. And it's interesting when she said, hey, Katie, I'm going to do a talk about, I think she did sleep, right? Or rest. What was her topic? Fatigue. It's fatigue. So she said, I want to do fatigue. And I said, yeah, I don't think I'm the right person to do that talk because lately I've been terribly fatigued. And this is where, we need to take her on medicine, right? So I said, no, you go. She's full of energy. And she was the right person. I'm all about spreading the love. And you wouldn't have gotten to know her if she didn't get to come herself. So I'm really glad that she was able to be here yesterday. So yes, we are part of Healthy Nurse, Healthy Nation. It's a program, and she told you about it, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but it's really about nurses' health and nurses leading the nation in being healthy, which is interesting because data will tell you, and I have that in one of my slides, we're one of the unhealthiest groups compared to the average American because of what we do and the impact of what we do and how it impacts what we do after we do what we do as nurses. The other thing that I'm a part of is the End Nurse Abuse Workplace Violence work, where we focus on, everybody knows this is a major issue in nursing. We're the most trusted, but are we the most respected? So we do have issues where workplace violence has increased significantly, not just with incivility and bullying, but also violence from patients and families and visitors and, everything that's happening in the world, right? It impacts healthcare and it impacts nurses, too, and healthcare professionals. Also, Project First Line, which is a CDC grant where we focus on infection prevention and control resources for nurses. It's a $2.5 million grant over 3 years. We're heading into our third year, and we provide free resources for nurses and anyone who wants to partake to really deal with the era that we've always been in, but even more so because we're constantly being threatened biologically, right? Our systems are weakened, and the viruses and the agents that harm us are getting stronger and more virulent. So that's what we do. If you want to hear about any of these programs afterwards, please let me know. Happy to connect with you. Safe Patient Handling and Mobility is another program that we do. Just published a book, a second edition on that, where we're trying to create an environment where nurses are taking care of themselves and removing those occupational hazards and not lifting patients. The National Commission to Address Racism in Nursing, I'm not going to talk about that much because there's a lot that's going to come, I believe, right, Marcus, on Friday, that we're going to do a panel on that with the foundational report that's recently was released, so not going to touch on that too much, but a lot of great work there. Who's familiar with that work, by the way, with the Commission to Address it? Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see that. There's so many places that I go, unfortunately, where nurses are like, what is that? Not sure. And the less diverse the audience, the more unknown it is, unfortunately. So we have some work to do there. But the other work that I'm doing right now, everyone knows we're in a staffing crisis. And we're trying to do our part to help stave it off. So we assembled a diverse group of stakeholders to help us with addressing this issue. CNOs, CEOs, presidents, patient advocates, nurses, human resource folks, you name it. We did a think tank, put together a think tank, met 6 times early in the year. We have recommendations published on our site for you to look at those. It addresses 6 aspects of the staffing crisis, and now we've evolved into a task force where we do the heavy lifting to address the structural wicked problems with the nursing staffing crisis that we have. Everyone knows this is not new. It just got worse, and this is unique, unlike any other, right? Everyone agree? We do have some folks that their head in their sand that this will pass. It ain't passing. So we're trying to figure out what we can do to address this issue as well. I also want you to know a little bit about me, and this is how I bring you closer to the person at the podium. This is the picture from my pinning ceremony in 1993. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, you're making my day. So yes, that was in 1993 when I graduated. That's when I got my PhD in 2020, 2019, right before the pandemic. That's my family, my daughter, my husband, my son. My daughter just graduated from high school, and she's going to be going to Temple. My son lives in Greensboro, and he's a dentist. He just bought his own practice. I know, right? A lot of stuff to tell you there. And then that's my sister who joined us as well. And that's his dog, but I kind of cop him. He's kind of mine, Kobe. And then that's her cat, Prince, who acts like he's Prince. And this is where I also want to talk about how a little bit about how nursing has impacted me to meet a lot of amazing people like you, not only in the US, but in other parts of the world. And this was a trip that I had to Abu Dhabi with other nurses to work with Siha Healthcare, which is a healthcare system in Abu Dhabi that's owned by the government there to help them achieve nursing excellence. So there are a few folks there, and we came from a number of other parts of the world. From one person, Tara, was from the UK, but everyone else was from the US. But the ladies in black were nurses that work actually in the system. So I just want to impart to you about how nursing has blessed me to be able to touch a number of nurses across the world, which is something that I also love. So this is where I'm going to ask you to indulge me, because I do a lot of these talks and about what's happening with nurses, particularly as it relates to well-being. And after like the 20th time of sharing it, you go, I need to put a spin on this to continue to pique my interest. Hope that's not my phone. Pique my interest as well, and help my energy in sharing not so good news with you. And it also helps with swallowing a hard pill, because there are a lot of brutal facts in my presentation. So I try to put a twist on the presentation, but to also help you remember some of the things that I'm going to say. So I'm going to use some of the concepts of making movies and writing scripts, so you can kind of see where nursing is and where we're headed, but how we can own creating the alternative ending in nursing. Because we all know if we don't do our part and we don't do enough, or if we don't do anything, we're in trouble. We're in trouble already. But I think this is part of the reason why I do this, is to help with addressing some of the apathy that I'm seeing and hearing, that it's bad, it's going to get worse, there are no solutions. So this is where I want to engage you to understand that. And everyone's seen a movie when all of a sudden you've seen it, you go, oh, I don't like that ending, and then they don't do DVDs or VHSs anymore. But they'll release one, they'll go say, oh, there's an alternative ending. You go, what? So this is kind of that, right? It's setting up how things can be different if we all did our part. Does that make sense? All right, so I'm going to play with the movie, the Titanic, to help bring you into where I am, and share with you some of the things that I've uncovered in terms of where the profession is and where we are as nurses. Who's not seen the movie? You have not seen the movie. But you know about the concept, I'm sure. Yeah. You haven't seen it either? I didn't know. There is an original? So who is in So who was in the original? What year was that?
Oh, I was a little girl.
Okay.
And it was black and white.
It was black and white. Alright,
It's a great movie. You should watch it and compare it.
so which one do you prefer, the older one or the older one? Oh, even with Leonardo? I mean, no? Okay. All right. Okay, so there are two Titanic movies. Make sure you watch the old version. It's in black and white. All right, so Did anyone read some of or has researched some of the real history behind it? You know how movies sensationalize, right? What were your takeaways from what happened with the Titanic? Do you mind sharing? I have a microphone if you feel you need it. Oh, thank you. Like, what are your takeaways from watching the movie? Not necessarily the love story, but
The original was really a lot about the disparities, who was in the bottom of the boat, who was in the top of the boat,
yeah.
how people, it was also about, I don't want to say hyper-masculinity, what do we say about the guy who took over the boat and didn't let the women get in and saved himself? Yeah.
Wait a
that
minute,
is-
is this Dr. Outlaw?
Yes.
Oh my God!
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you haven't. All right, I'll hug you later.
Coward.
Finally meeting her in person. I've talked to her so many times.
It was about being a coward. Now go on, Mary Lucas, you'll remember more than me.
No, well, there was a juxtaposition of cowardice as well as bravery. But to me, on both sides, there was cowardice. There was bravery among the women as much as among the men. But definitely cowardice and just really courage, but also a lot of self-serving because they risked the people versus proving that this boat was the best and ignored major signals. Major signals.
Right, and loyalty.
And loyalty, yeah.
They did their duty.
Yeah.
It was duty and loyalty. They
But-
went down with the boat.
Yes, down with the boat, but missing those major signals was amazing. They didn't listen, yeah.
Amazing. Among the administration, among the people who were in charge.
That is amazing. What's your name? I'm Mary. Hey, Mary. So hold that thought on the major signals, all right? Because that's where I want to focus. The bravery that occurred at the end, it's important, right? Because that's what's required with what we're facing. Oh, another, yes.
I'll project. I was looking for it yesterday, but before the Southwest Wharf became what it is now, there used to be a monument to the men that gave up their lives on the Titanic here in Southwest. It was at the end of the wharf. And once a year, on the anniversary of the Titanic sinking, the family members family members generations later always come and toast. They leave a wreath and smoke, but it's only the men, smoke a cigar. But that's done once a year. But I've been looking for the monument, but they did have a monument to the Titanic here on the wharf.
So we have some buffs here on this. So you can certainly help me with this presentation when the time comes. So thank you. I really appreciate that. But the signals is where I want us to focus, right? Bear that in mind. I have a video for you, but I'm going to introduce you to the concept first before I play the video. So I'm a little out of order. And once you read this definition, I want you to tell me whether you've seen this before. So this is under the umbrella of Too Big to Fail. A great TED Talk. I'm going to show a portion of it, but the title of it is How to Kill Your Own Company. Highly encourage it. It's not as ominous as it sounds, actually, but it goes through some of what you just shared, Mary, in terms of the signals that were ignored. And Dr. Nadja, who's a survivalist, and that's her specialty, and she was born in chaos and survival and change. Her theory is mostly about how we need to embrace change more and how we lose time because of the time it takes for us to embrace change, right? For years, we give grace to people. It's going to take some time. Oh, you're not ready yet, right? And most of the time when people have great ideas, it's not that they don't believe in the idea. It's to be able to it's the unwillingness to do the work, right, that's required for that change is what causes people to balk. So what does this definition say to you about connecting the movie to what you see up there, right? This is under the category of too big to fail. And it makes you wonder, do we have a little bit of that going on in healthcare? Do we have a little bit of that going on in nursing? because we feel that it's going to be all right. We've been here for years, not going anywhere. Nurses, people will be interested in the profession forever. Nurses will still work till they're 70. They'll still be around. We're going to be fine. This is where we are as a profession. So hold that thought. Remember this definition. I'll come back to it. Could we just do the video? This is a snippet of the video that I mentioned to you.
Reason for the death of Titanic, the iceberg. It's so tempting to blame the iceberg. Don't we all love blaming?
Pause it there. How to Kill Your Own Company. Check it out. Like, amazing. So I'll wait for my slides to come back up. So we're going to use the way scripts are. Has anyone here written a movie script ever? Or knows how that comes about or how that works? Oh, Mike, sorry. Did you guys hear what I asked? I'll ask it again. Okay, you did? All right, so this is how movie scripts, and when you look at this, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? You know, and this is me reaching out to my lifetime TV watchers on Sundays. Sometimes the drama starts right away, though, right? And then, of course, the woman's always saving the men at the end. But this is really how movie scripts are made. It's set up where there's an exposition, where you get the background. It has rising action when things start to occur to build up to the climax. And then there's the falling action piece of it, where things start to somewhat resolve. And then the actual resolution. The kiss at the end. Yes, everybody's happy, you know. Now, but we also know that there's some scripts where it's like, it just ends abruptly, and you go, wait a minute, where's the resolution, right? There are more and more movies that are being made that way. But so I want to use this to build, this approach to build what I'm going to share with you today, okay? So let's talk about the actors. The actors are us, right? It's the folks that are running the hospital, it's the nurses, it's the physicians, and it changes, right? And there are more people you can add in depending on where you work. So I'm not trying to indicate that, you know, this is all about the hospital setting, because practice happens everywhere, nursing happens everywhere. So I want to make sure that's clear. But it's us, and I deliberately put nurses in the middle, not just because I'm a nurse, but we outnumber everybody else. And we're there 24/7. So when we talk about the Titanic, Mary, to your point about the signals that were ignored, the Titanic had binoculars on board. And remember when Naja said people want to blame the iceberg, it's all about the iceberg. It's really not about the iceberg, but that's how the story sometimes gets told, that the iceberg floated towards a pandemic. I mean, well, I said pandemic because the pandemic, in my mind, that's today's iceberg, isn't it? I was going to set it up for you to tell me. I messed that up. Ugh. But that's pretty much the premise here, is that the iceberg is the pandemic. But the iceberg did not float towards the boat. The boat hit the iceberg. And there were binoculars on board, and they had a crow's nest for people on board, the workers, to be able to see it from afar. They never took them out. So even though I said no binoculars, it means really that they were not used. Again, I'm using these terms for you to think about where nursing is and where are binoculars and whether they're being used to address the issues that we're facing. The binoculars also were locked, and they were locked away. And there was a process to get the key. The folks that had to use the binoculars had to go through a number of processes to get, and people to get the key, which is also a systems issue, right? Because given the importance of using the binoculars and how they need to be able to use it regularly, why was it locked away? And this is, to me, the analogy is to the solutions that exist for us to address some of what's happening in our profession and in healthcare overall, as the solutions behind some sort of process and structural barrier that prevents people from implementing these solutions. The priorities are also an issue, and the lack of focus is the other death factor with the pandemic. A pandemic, goodness gracious, with the Titanic. There were, and you know how telephones worked back then, it was mostly operator to operator, right? You can just pick up a phone and call somebody. So there were calls, distress signals, and calls that were being made to people on the boat that you need to heed to the fact that you're headed towards disaster. But the lines were tied up because the operators on the boat were busy calling the rich people to tell them, ask them what their activities need to be for that evening. And when a couple of operators broke through, the response was, I don't have time right now, I have to deal with these rich clients. Lack of focus. And of course, it's that infallible thinking. So what, there's an iceberg. This is the biggest ship ever. It could just break it. And then an over-reliance on experts. I mentioned earlier, I never want to be the only expert in the room. They did have an expert on there to manage disasters on the boat. But the disasters that he had experience with had nothing in comparison to what he was about to face. So there was an over-reliance on this gentleman's expertise that totally wasn't inapplicable to the disaster that they were going to face. And he had a lot of old knowledge that didn't apply to what they were facing at that time. Similarly, we say, if we're looking up research for solutions on what's happening today in nursing, anything prior to the pandemic has not been battle tested for us to utilize to address where we're going. So here's the exposition. This is the background that I'm going to give you. Again, we're building the script, right? We're climbing the mountain. Remember that visual? So we go back to 1873, where nurses were at the time. And the reason I always use this slide, because I want to make sure people know that we always had problems in the profession. People go, what? This is new. No, it's not. The issues with work environment, it's not a new issue. The issues with nurses' pay, not a new issue, right? If you keep going down the list, these are all issues that were there before, but we never dealt with them. And here they are, right? Full frontal. And we're still struggling with how we're going to deal with them, but we're treating them as if they're new. So when you look at this, you also see how I talked earlier about how nurses are most trusted, but not necessarily the most respected. If you look at the fourth bullet, there's a reason why it's embedded in history. And I know we have some history buffs in this room, but anyone was able to be called a nurse. And it was not necessarily the cream of the crop people, and it was always attached to women. So you also wonder why we're still in this place with some of the things that we're struggling with the value in determining the value of nursing. Is it because it's a predominantly female profession? Right? Those are all questions. I'm not saying that that is the case, but you have to think about that as well. But it was for the unfit. Those were the people that were the nurses. It wasn't seen as a profession, and there had to be advocacy, true, on the ground, boots on the ground advocacy for us to get here, for it to be recognized as a profession. And still to this day, there are people in the lay public that don't see us as at the level that we should be considered as in terms of contributing to science. The providers that we have, the APRN, some of you, in terms of your experiences as well with being independent practitioners, they see it, some people in the public see us as comforters or just carrying out the doctor's orders. We have work to do. This is an old slide from a presentation in 2016 by our CNO, Debbie Hatmaker, to the VNA. Again, a lot of these issues back in 2016, well before the pandemic. I mentioned this earlier. Nurses are a lot unhealthier compared to the average American, as you can see there. It's the fourth highest rate of injuries and illnesses occupationally. And this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Likely to be overweight. I know Holly probably touched on all this too, so I'm not going to go into this a lot of detail. But this is really concerning for our profession. And you wonder why people struggle to stay in it. And we're starting to see drops in people that are interested in entering into it. So the pandemic happened, i.e. the iceberg. And here are all the headlines that we've been hit with. Redonda Vaught, everyone remembers that case, right? The nurse. Oh, you're from, that's right. You are. Yeah. And thankfully, she was given a, I think, what was it, a suspended sentence? She wasn't criminal, right, but that was the goal, right? So you have all these headlines. There's suicide, major issue as well. We have some positives. The nurse that did the Boston Marathon and ran for mental health, travel pay, travel nurses and pay. And there is an impression that you pay nurses, they will come. I say not true. They will come, but for a minute. I've experienced it. Third of nurses plan to leave their jobs in 2022. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on, right? Of course, workplace violence continues to reign, unfortunately. So this is where I start sharing some data with you behind a lot of those headlines that we collected at ANA. And some of you are probably familiar with this. And I'm really struggling with sharing this with you because we have new data from a survey that we just closed and analyzed this month. But I can't share it with you because it's embargoed. But I can tell you that there's not much change. The issues with stress and feeling stressed, overwhelmed, feeling devalued and things like that, those numbers are coming down. But it's still under the category of, we shouldn't be here. Like, if you have data that indicates that 80% of nurses felt stressed and overwhelmed and frustrated, and it's now 70%, I can't celebrate that, right? So this is data on workplace violence. So I'll give you some of what we gathered from I can't share the data with you, but I can share some of the assumptions with you. The issues with workplace violence and bullying is still very much the case. A lot of bullying that nurses face at work, and that's the question that we ask. If we experience increased bullying or violence in the past year or so, check all that apply. Bullying at work, I'm going to pull it up here because I can't really see. All right. In the past year, have you experienced bullying at work? You have 66% of nurses saying that they do. Violence at work is another piece. And in our recent data and survey, we actually saw nurses say that they experienced violence from their managers and supervisors. Trying to unpack what that means, but that is very concerning. But highest incivility, of course, is peer-to-peer. Unfortunately, that's still there. There's also the issue of this new nurse just got hired with less experience than me, is making more than me. I'm going to make her pay in other ways. That dynamic is playing out in addition to, some lateral violence, verbal and not supportive actions or behaviors towards travelers. And in a lot of places, that's all people have. You can see the areas where it's, actually, let me do that. Yep. So where it's statistically significant in terms of specialty, we're seeing a lot of data, in our recent data, a lot of bullying and civilian violence in psych and mental health nurses. And we knew that was kind of there, but it's really jumping out at us right now. So I'd love for you to sit on that and think on that as well, given your expertise as well. This is on wanting to leave your position. Check the following reasons for wanting to leave your position. This is the first time we saw a direct correlation between insufficient staffing and well-being. And we knew that's kind of was there, but to see it spelled out in the data was very significant. So nurses are saying, and it makes sense, right? Like, if I don't have the team that I need, it's going to make for a recipe for a very bad day. and everything else rolls after that in the wrong direction. So lack of support from my employer during the pandemic. There's a sense of betrayal that still looms also in the profession. Inability to deliver care consistently. That was an overriding theme for all of the data that we did get in this survey, that the most distress that I have when I leave every day is the fact that I never got to provide the care that I wanted to give. And you can't fix that, right? Patients are discharged or the day is gone, right? And you wonder what the impact will be, and you have the redundant thing issue case that's looming as well, right? Because a lot of nurses are really concerned about that. Here you have data on do you agree or disagree with the following statements? 1 to 5 being strongly agree, 5 being strongly agree. My organization really cares about my well-being. Now, this number, this area or this item hit I think in the first survey, we were at 2.79, but the score in the second survey was 2.9, and the number is dropping with this current survey. Nurses are feeling more and more that their employer doesn't care about their well-being. And maybe that is a connection to, I don't have the resources that I need, I don't have the staffing that I need, so you must not care. And also, are you doing the right things? Because we hear that a lot, that employers are doing things, but they're not the things that are going to help a nurse or a professional with what they have to face every day. Fix my pain points, right? The next is really a summary of the survey, because I don't want to bore you too much data, but this is pretty much the overall overview of that survey, our last survey. Optimism dropped 20%. Those numbers are going to go up in this new survey that we just analyzed. Reports of traumatic events have increased by 25%. Large gap between younger and older nurses. Our younger nurses are voting with their feet more than ever before. There's, for the first time in 4 decades, a drop in the nursing workforce population. And it's not because older nurses retired. It's because we're seeing younger nurses saying, I'm good, I'm out. Now, they're keeping their licenses, but they're doing other things, right? So that's a dynamic that we're seeing. And they're aggressively pursuing other opportunities. And when I say younger nurses, it's a group between 25 and 34, by the way. 2/3 of younger nurses feel their organizations do not care about their well-being, compared to a smaller number with our nurses that are older than 35. 52% of nurses considering leaving the profession. A downward spiral in terms of nurses leaving because of the shortage, feeling unsupported. Increasing number of nurses that are leaving because they can no longer deliver quality care. I talked about that. Increased pay and having more nurses are key factors to make things better, but it doesn't fix everything. And a disconnect between nursing leadership solutions and what nurses need. And that was a major overriding theme with the survey that will be out soon. Nurses do not feel that they're being listened to. And then, of course, everyone's experiencing a staffing shortage. That's not a surprise. We've also done some work on racism in nursing, to what I mentioned earlier, and you'll hear more about this. Marcus is very familiar with this work, Dr. Bronner as well. We started with listening sessions, and I'll share that with you, but I'm starting with the quantitative data, because sometimes that's what people need to see first. There's some non-believers with qualitative, but qualitative data or research, which is what I do, really helps provide more context and lifts the stories, because that's what we react to. So you'll see some of that feedback. But this is an infographic from our quantitative survey. Anything here surprise you? No? It depends on the room.
That surprises me. I thought it may be higher.
Well, remember, nursing is what? Predominantly. And we did see a disparity, a huge disparity, and you see it actually to your right. That tells a story. even though 92% of nurses experience racism in the workplace, when you dilute those numbers with the highest number of nurses that are white, it's going to bring your numbers down to 63%. Yes. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Yeah, we're struggling to hear you. I think it's a mask and everything. And I think you have a very important question. We want to hear you. Oops.
Are you folks hearing me? Okay, my question's around the 28% of nursing that report experiencing racism. So that's based on what they think they're treated differently based on their race. But, you know, the profession is almost greater than 90% white. So, like, the power structure that accompanies racism by definition isn't necessarily a part of that. So I'm just reasoning in my mind that percentage.
So personal experience doesn't mean that you experienced it yourself. You could have witnessed it too. That's one. The other thing is that from our verbatim responses, there were things that white nurses would call racism that were not. We saw that play out as well. Marcus, I don't know if you have anything you want to add, because I know you're part of this work too. But we know that even now, and I'll go into that a little bit. We just released our reckoning statement, and most of our members are white. They're struggling with the reckoning statement that we released. And they're saying that this is wokeism that's infiltrated ANA. In some circles, you are getting wait a minute, we're all nurses, we all love each other. What you talking about, Willis? There's no way. Yeah, it happens out there. Doesn't happen in here. That is an unfortunate dynamic. I do want to say, there are a number of nurses that are true allies. True allies, you know, that are really carrying the bucket on this, too. So please know that I'm not saying that this is the case for all white nurses or non-nurses of color. Does that make sense? I don't know if I answered your question. But let me go into the qualitative data that might help you a little bit more. So these are listening sessions that we held between February and April of 2021. Themes that we had from the listening sessions, and we had 5 of them. And we did a come one, come all. We never said this is only for nurses of color. We invited everybody. And these are some of the comments that we got that I extracted from that work. The things that some of our nurses actually said. And it hurts to read that, doesn't it? It's hard to believe that this is happening in our profession. But it's a reality check, too. That just because we get pinned and we go through nursing school, we don't become angels. Because people that become nurses are pulled from the general population. We should never forget that, as in any profession. And that's why it's also indicative of the fact that we have work to do as well, to recognize that it's not automatic, so that's where the intentionality comes in, right? And the work that we do to make sure that we set things right. And there are also behaviors that people don't realize are harmful and hurtful. There's a lot of talk about microaggressions, where you say you call it microaggressions, but it's really macro when it hits me here. Mm-hmm. And after going through the 8th hour of my 12-hour shift, and after I go through all these conversations that I have to address or fix or witness, there's a weathering that occurs too, right? Because Dr. Williams says this too, even concrete, one of the strongest materials in the world, if you have a drop of water that drips on it after a while, that concrete will erode. So this is a real issue in our profession. This is more feedback, and I'm deliberately not reading it to you because I know I'm running out of time, but this is more feedback from our listening sessions as well, being called the N-word. nurse assignments being switched because a patient has an issue with you because of your skin color, right? All those things are real. So it's a crazy world. It's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. What's up, down is up, and what's up is down, which is a challenge as well. I should move my slides here, sorry. But with VUCA, and everyone is aware of the term VUCA, but it really does put some terms to what we're facing today. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. But how we deal with that is to create vision, understanding, clarity, and agility with what we're facing. And we all admit, because of what we're seeing and what we're all witnessing, the world isn't well. So here's the rising action part of this presentation. We start to head towards some way of contending with issues, but then there's conflict as well, because the solutions are not matching the issues at hand. But if we set up things where we have disciplined people, disciplined thought, disciplined action, we can certainly have a breakthrough. One of the things that we can't do is have positive toxicity, where we're just being thankful and appreciative because we're alive, so we should be happy.
Yeah.
And that's a dynamic that's playing out. And when we do that, we're dishonoring people that are really going through issues, and they hesitate to bring them up. This is a premise around the mismatch or the misalignment in terms of solutions versus, at least understand the nurse's perception of what's really happening, where I'm feeling this, but you're doing that, right? And this is under the umbrella of, you're so resilient. And also another thing that happens where people say, oh yeah, you're burned out. I'm sure you can't wait to go home and hug your children. It's like, no, fix my issues while I'm here for this 12-hour shift. So this is where I also try to really make sure that people know, particularly leaders, that self-care is not a cure for burnout. The cure for burnout is to fix the pain points where people work. You see at the bottom the 3 symptoms of burnout, at the top the 3 root causes of burnout, particularly with nurses, but using Maslow. Some of you are also very familiar with this concept. And this is going to the discussion around resilience, right? That the comments like, you're so resilient, you got this. The wording has been so overutilized where it doesn't have any value anymore. And then on top of that, you bring resiliency training to me, where the meaning of my name is probably resilient. I was born in the struggle, right? And sometimes you're facing someone of privilege. It's also being the one that's teaching you to be resilient. That's hard. And then you add in the racial dynamics, right? Like, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be dealing with this. Come on now. It's really that belief of there's an equal exchange of energy. You want the best for me, but you're not giving it in return. We're also dealing in an era of employee activism, where people that work with us, for us, are expecting social activism and social change work that's meaningful versus just words and things that are performative. There's also a requirement for leadership to be different, where we're not using industrial age approaches to leading people. We're being more coaches than managers, and managing and leading networks versus large teams, and treating people with respect and having them give opinions on what could work, what could be better. Not using the carrot and the stick approach to getting people to do what they should do. That's the violence that we're seeing in the data as well. And then remember, the barometer that things are not right is not that, well, we got through the day and patients are kind of safe. Because broken crayons still color. Nurses will still provide nursing care. They're just not at their best when they're delivering it. So here's a resolution, and this is where we create the alternative ending. You remember this scene in Titanic. This is not the version, Dr. Outlaw and Mary, that you saw. But at this point, Leonardo passes away. But this is a piece about Titanic syndrome, where the death of where we should be is happening, and it is a slow death in healthcare. You know how it happens, right? And we're seeing it. Hospitals are closing labor and delivery units. They're shutting down ICUs for weeks at a time because they can't staff it. You see, anyone not seen that in the news? Becker's released, just yesterday, they released data on, and those are just the 6 that they know. 6 hospitals that are shutting down services, closing units, and these are key areas to provide care to communities. So you have to think about how that's impacting those communities as well. So the alternative ending comes with us creating new maps, or using new maps, because we're in a new place, new world. And that's important for us to understand. There are tools available. We did craft, I mentioned this earlier, recommendations with our think tank in terms of how we can address the issues in nursing. This is one sample of it, where we have recommendations on how to deal with stress injury continuum. I'm not going to go through them, and I'm sure you guys will get these slides, I'm sure. I think, right? Racial reckoning statement. Is anyone aware of this, by the way? The ANA did a racial reckoning statement, just released it? Yes? Yes? Has anyone read it? Thoughts? Throw it at me. Huh? And it doesn't matter. Be brutally honest, and it's okay.
Who's giving that?
Oh, you asked it.
Yeah, just, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I wrote, oh, sorry.
She's like, I don't know.
I've been writing about this since you all asked for feedback initially. And so I'm going to say I read it, but I've got to think a lot about it. Because just like the old Titanic movie and the new Titanic movie, the ones of us who have been around for a while, we have to deal with our feelings.
Yes.
A lot of our feelings, just like you were talking about, some of this is not new, and we have seen it come, and there's a big energy toward solving the problem, and then it goes away, and then it comes back like every 10 years. I'm not sure what the pandemic is going to do, because that's a new kind of thing, I think, that has implications for a lot of things. So I'm going to sort of pass it. So that's my thought right now. I don't want to say too much before I've really thought about it, except that I know for me, when I was reading it, I was feeling some kind of way, as we say sometimes in our communities, about some of this. And I also said, we can talk about this, but we need to see where things are, who's leading what, and where are people who are really making the decisions. And I even read all of I did read the feedback when the qualitative feedback came out when they were doing the listening sessions. I read all of that feedback too, about how nurses were having some of the same issues that we had. When I went into nursing, there was less than 1% of people of color of African descent in nursing. And so, but the same things were being experienced. So I was like, what is that about?
Yeah.
So let me pass it on to some of my colleagues who have read it.
Yeah, and I think because of time, I may not be able to continue, but I would love to hear your thoughts, and that is definitely what's expected, that you need time, because it's a lot to consume. It does stir up emotions, and patience is required on all sides, right? And there's no immediate fix to, yes, I'm sorry I missed your hand, so I hope it wasn't up the whole time. Okay.
Hello?
Yes.
So I had a chance to read about, read most of it, but the forgiveness piece, there was a Caucasian supervisor who a nursing supervisor who had some feelings on this and wanted to discuss it before a meeting. And she started out the conversation by saying, I don't want to discuss this, but I think that I want to ask a question. Do you feel like I need to ask for forgiveness? Though, like I need to give an apology, and my immediate response was, first of all, not starting out like that. I don't think that anyone would want an apology if you begin the conversation in that way. So I think we should have, if we're going to have a conversation, let's make it intentional, and let's start off with the right attitude and have it be an open conversation. But so I think that there's been a lot of pushback, maybe in some local places and in hospitals, and that there's not a feeling that it's completely embraced by the majority of nurses. So that's a concern.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's very interesting, and it's actually a good takeaway from me because we probably need to do some more allyship work there for people to know what to do. I remember with the recent the issue that we had with the death of George Floyd, and I had some of my white friends that would reach out to me and say, I didn't know that you might be struggling with your son in terms of, driving and, being able to tell them about what to do when they drive. And I was like, okay. And she was emotional. It's like, but I said, I don't know, now you're putting your emotions on me. I don't need this. So, yes, it is challenging. So, yes, I think we have some work to do there.
Yes, I have a comment about the forgiveness portion. I guess when I look at the word forgiveness, it stood out to me, and I'm wondering, I don't see anything there about the action steps that will be taken to correct the problem. It's one thing to say, I forgive you, let's forget about it. It's another thing to say, how will we change the system? Because it's a systematic thing. It's
Yeah.
something in the system.
Yeah.
What steps are we going to take to change it? I can forgive. Most of the time, we say we can forgive and forget, but we're not forgetting. So
Yeah.
what are you going to do to change the system?
That's
That's
very
my question.
Yeah, that's very fair. And it's all about the work that happens after we release a statement. That's where it's at. So want to just end with this because I know I'm over. Oh, I have 4 minutes? So has anyone read Good to Great? Such a good book, wasn't it? Okay, so you remember, and I had some of the concepts in my slide, right? So the Stockdale paradox. Do you want to share? You care to share? Am I putting you on the spot? Okay, I will. So the Stockdale paradox, Good to Great, by Jim Collins. Great book. The Stockdale paradox is a concept by General Stockdale, who was in captivity, a prisoner of war, and he was there with his men. And the conversation or the story was really about how Jim was interviewing him, and he was helping him see, was trying to understand his mode of survival. Like, how did you make it and some of your men didn't? Because some men died in captivity. And he said that, I had this prevailing belief that I was gonna win in the end. And Jim said, so that makes you an optimist. And he was like, oh, hell no, I'm not an optimist. There's no way. That means that I said, I choose to confront the brutal facts of what the situation I'm in while I believe that I'm gonna prevail. Optimists don't confront the brutal facts, and I do both. And the reason I share that is that's the place that we are in, and that's what happens when I share the data and a lot of these stories about the places that we're in, because I do get from people that, well, what's the positive in this? And, you're supposed to be uplifting to share about how we're gonna make it through. We will make it through this, but we have work to do. That's the gateway to breakthrough. But we have to confront the brutal facts of what we're dealing with in the profession and in healthcare, because it's dying a slow death. And we should be concerned because we are consumers too. So it's important for us to believe we're going to win, but confront the facts, and while we're at it, do the work, right? That is the main aspect of that's mainly what I want to leave you with today. So with that, and I know you have the mic, we can do this because of who we are. We are resilient. We are rebels. And this is what I attempt to replace the R and RN. We're not just registered nurses. So we're resilient, we're rebellious, we're radiant, we're radical, we're reputable, we're repellent, we're reverent, we're refined, we're restless, we're reflective, we're resourceful, we're revered, and really, we can reshape the healthcare industry. People always look at us like what is gonna? So this is where I want to say thank you. Our bounds are limitless, but we have the work to do, and I really appreciate the time that you spent listening to me. That's how you can reach me. My email's up there, and you can scan the code. That's my LinkedIn profile. Thank you for your time.
Let's
Appreciate
say
you all.
thank you. Dr. Katie Boston-Leary.